trying to swallow more air than water because this is almost empty. Alright. Badass woman in Herstory, possibly. Margaret Higgins Sanger. Born September 14th, 1879 and passed September 6th, 1966. She was American-born birth control activist, sex educator, writer, nurse. She popularized the term birth control, opened the first birth control clinic in the United States, and established organizations that evolved into the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. So this one is Margaret Sanger used her writings and speeches primarily to promote her way of thinking. She was prosecuted for her book, Family Limitation, under the Comstock Act in 1914. She feared the consequences of her writings, so she fled to Britain until public opinion had quieted. Let's see. Sanger's efforts contributed to several judicial cases that helped legalize contraception in the U.S. Due to her connection with Planned Parenthood, Sanger is frequently criticized by opponents of abortion. However, Sanger drew a sharp distinction between birth control and abortion and was opposed to abortions throughout the bulk of her professional career, declining to participate in them as a nurse. Not a lot of people know this. Sanger remains an admired figure in the American reproductive rights movement. She has also been criticized for supporting eugenics. In 1960, Sanger opened up the first birth control clinic in the United States. Yo, I'm gonna look up eugenics, which led to her arrest for distributing information on contraception after an undercover policewoman bought a copy for a pamphlet on family planning. Her subsequent trial and appeal generated controversy. Sanger felt that in order for women to have more equal footing in society and lead to healthier lives, they needed to be able to determine when to bear children. She also wanted to prevent the so-called back alley abortions, which were common at the time because abortions were illegal in the United States. She believed that while abortion may be a viable option in life-threatening situations for the pregnant, it should generally be avoided. She considered contraception the only practical way to avoid them. Eugenics is a fringe set of beliefs, going back to what eugenics was, and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population. Historically, eugenics have attempted to alter human gene pools by excluding people and groups judged to be inferior or promoting those judged to be superior. That sounds iffy. But interesting. I mean, not in a good way. Alright, let's see. In 1921, Sanger founded the American Birth Control League, which later became the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. In New York City, she organized the first birth control clinic to be staffed by all female doctors, as well as a clinic in Harlem, which had an all African American advisory council, where African American staff were later added. In 1929, she formed the National Committee on Federal Legislation for Birth Control, which served as the focal point of her lobbying efforts to legalize contraception in the United States. From 52 to 59, 1952-1959, she served as president of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. She died in 1966 and is widely regarded as founder of the modern birth control movement. Now let's go into her childhood. She was born Margaret Louise Higgins in 1879 in Corning, New York, to Irish Catholic parents, a free-thinking stonemason father, Michael Hennessy Higgins, and Anne Purcell Higgins. Michael had immigrated to the United States age 14, joining the Army in the Civil War as a drummer age 15. Upon leaving the Army, he studied medicine and phrenology. He didn't say what side he joined. It doesn't matter. But if they don't say it, then it's probably on the south side. South side? South side? Upon leaving the army, he studied medicine and phrenology, but ultimately became a stonecutter, chiseling out angels, saints, and tombstones. Michael became an atheist and an activist for women's suffrage and free publication. Whoa, so something happened where he became an atheist. Annie, it's the church, man. The church put off so many people. Annie accompanied her family to Canada during the Great Famine. She married Michael in 1869. In 22 years, who the fuck is Michael? Oh, Anne is the mom. Anne accompanied her family to Canada during the Great Famine. She married Michael in 1869. In 22 years, Anne Higgins conceived 18 times, birthing 11 alive before dying age 49. Sanger was the sixth of 11 surviving children, spending her early years in a bustling household. Supported by her two older sisters, Margaret Higgins attended Claverack College and Hudson River Institute before enrolling in 1900 at shout out to class of 1900 at White Plains Hospital as a nurse probationer. In 1902, she married architect William Sanger, giving up her education. Suffering from consumption, reoccurring active tubercular, Margaret Sanger was able to bear 3 children, and the 5 settled down to a quiet life in Westchester, New York. Margaret would become a member of an Episcopal church, which would later hold her funeral service. In 1911, after a fire destroyed their home in Hastings on Hudson, the Sangers abandoned the suburbs for a new life in New York City. Margaret Sanger worked as a visiting nurse in the slums of the East Side, while her husband worked as an architect and a house painter. The couple became active in local socialist politics. She joined the Women's Committee of the New York Socialist Party, took part in the labor actions of the industrial workers of the world, including the notable 1912 Lawrence Textile. But I understand why. I get it. Strike in the 1913 Patterson Silk Strike, and became involved with local intellectuals, left-wing artists, socialists, and social activists, including John Reed, Upton Sinclair, Mabel Dodge, and Emma Goldman. She got in with Hollywood. No, I'm just kidding. Her political interests, her emerging feminism, and her nursing experiments led her to write 2 series of columns on sex education, which were titled What Every Mother Should Know and What Every Girl Should Know. So the What Every Mother Should Know came out in 1911, 1912, and the other one came out in 1912, 1913. For the socialist magazine New York Call. By the standards of the day, Sanger's articles were extremely frank in their discussion of sexuality, and many New York Call readers were outraged by them. Other readers, however, praised the series for its candor. One stated that the series contained a purer morality than the whole libraries full of hypocritical cant about modesty. Both were published in book form in 1916. During her work amongst immigrant class women, she met women who underwent frequent childbirth, miscarriages, and self-induced abortions for lack of information on how to avoid unwanted pregnancy. That is very helpful, man. Leave me you. Shout out to birth control. So let's see. Let me scoot through some stuff because this is 10 whole pages. She became estranged from her husband in 1913. The couple's divorce was finalized in 21. She married her second husband in 1922, James Noah H. Lee. Alright, 1914, she launched The Woman Rebel, an 8-page monthly newsletter which promoted contraception using the slogan, "No gods, no masters." Sanger, collaborating with anarchist friends, popularized the term birth control as a more candid alternative to euphemisms such as family limitation. The term birth control was suggested in 1914 by a young friend called Otto Bobsty. Sanger proclaimed that each woman should be the absolute mistress of her own body. In the early years of Sanger's activism, she viewed birth control as a free speech issue, And when she started publishing The Woman Rebel, one of her goals was to provoke a legal challenge to the federal anti-obscenity laws, which banned dissemination of information about contraception. So if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't even be able to talk about this right now. So, most great people in history are not perfect. That's what you gotta remember. So if you may disagree or agree with some aspects, that's okay. You don't have to just write a person off for what they did for history. So she had a 16-page pamphlet containing detailed, precise information and graphic descriptions of various contraceptive methods, a how-to per se. And in August 1914, she was indicted for violating postal obscenity laws by sending The Woman Rebel through the postal system. Rather than stand trial, she fled the country. She spent much of her 1914 exile in England, where contact with British neo-Malthusians such as Charles Vickery Drysdale helped refine her socioeconomic justifications for birth control. She said that overpopulation led to poverty, famine, and war. I mean, there's some clout to that. Let's see. She came back. When did she come back? Alright, after World War I, this is interesting. Sanger shifted away from radical politics and she founded the American Birth Control League, the ABCL, in 1921 to enlarge her base of supporters to include the middle class. The founding principles of the ABCL were as follows. We hold that children should be conceived in love. Number 2, born of the mother's conscious desire. Number 3, and only begotten under conditions which render possible the heritage of health. Therefore, we hold that every woman must possess the power and freedom to prevent conception, except when these conditions can't be satisfied. So after her conviction for the Brownsville Clinic secured, because she had a clinic, she opened up a clinic, and I passed that up. I guess she got in trouble for the clinic. She smuggled diaphragms. Oh, no. Her husband smuggled diaphragms in New York through Canada in boxes labeled as 3-in-1 oil. He later became the first legal manufacturer of diaphragms in the United States. Some countries in Northwestern Europe had more liberal policies toward contraception than the United States at the time. And when Sanger visited a Dutch birth control clinic in 1915, she learned about diaphragms and became convinced that they were more effective means of contraception than the suppositories and douches that she had been distributing back in the United States. Diaphragms were generally unavailable in the U.S., so Sanger and others began importing them from Europe in defiance of United States law. On October 16, 1916, she opened a family planning and birth control clinic at 46 Amboy Street in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, the first of its kind in the United States. 9 days after the clinic opened, Sanger was arrested. Her bail was set at $500 and she went back home. She continued seeing some women in the clinic until the police came a second time. This time, Sanger and her sister Ethel Byrne were arrested for breaking a New York state law that prohibited distribution of contraceptives. Sanger was also charged with running a public nuisance. They went to trial in January of 1917. She was convicted and sentenced to 30 days in the workhouse, but went on a hunger strike. She was force-fed. Oof. Have y'all seen that force-fed shit? Who did it? Mos Def did it one time. Yazin Bey. She was forfeit, the first woman hunger striker in the U.S. to be so treated. Only when she pledged that Byrne would never break the law was she pardoned after 10 days. She was convicted, held that women did not have the right to copulate with the feeling of security that there would be no results in conception. Man. judge held that women did not have the right to copulate with the feeling of security that there will be no resulting conception. Bro. Singer was offered a more lenient sentence if she promised to not break the law again, but she replied, "I cannot respect the law as it exists today." For this, she was sentenced to 30 days in the workhouse. An initial appeal was rejected, but in subsequent court proceeding in 1918, the birth control movement won a victory when Judge Frederick E. Crane of the New York Court of Appeals issued a ruling which allowed doctors to prescribe contraception. The publicity surrounding Singer's arrest, trial, and appeal sparked birth control activism across the U.S. and earned the support of numerous donors who would provide her with funding and support for her future endeavors. That's pretty tight. In February of 1917, she began publishing the monthly periodical Birth Control Review. Let's see. After World War I, she shifted away from radical politics, and she founded the ABCL, and that's what I said earlier. Now, this is where it gets a little shaky, because John D. Rockefeller Jr. donated a lot of money to her. Which, I mean, there could be two reasons that somebody wants contraception available. One for safe and healthy, the other for less people. For some people. Yo. So it says that she worked with African American leaders and professionals who saw a need for birth control in their communities. In 1929, James H. Hubert, a black social worker and the leader of New York's Urban League, asked Sanger to open a clinic in Harlem. She secured funding from the Julius Rosenwald Fund and opened the clinic, staffed with black doctors, in 1930. The clinic was directed by a 15-member advisory board consisting of black doctors, nurses, clergy, journalists, and social workers. The clinic was publicized in the African American press as well as in black churches, and it received the approval of W.E.B. Du Bois, the co-founder of the NAACP and the editor of its magazine, The Crisis. She did not tolerate bigotry among her staff, nor would she tolerate any refusal to work within interracial projects. Sanger's work with minorities earned praise from Coretta and Martin Luther King Jr. when he was not able to attend his Margaret Sanger Award ceremony in 1966 of May. It says King read her husband's acceptance speech that praised Sanger, but said her own words, "Because of Sanger's dedication, her deep convictions, and for her suffering for what she believed in, I would like to say that I'm proud to be a woman tonight." Damn. That's pretty tight. People don't talk about that a lot. Now, she also opposed so even though she wanted this contraceptive control, she did oppose excessive sexual indulgence, according to Wikipedia. She wrote that every normal man and woman has the power to control and direct his sexual impulse. Men and women who have it in control and constantly use their brain cells thinking deeply are never sensual. Sanger said that birth control would elevate women away from the position of being objects of lust and elevate sex away from an activity that was purely being engaged in for the purpose of satisfying lust, saying that the birth control denies that sex should be reduced to the position of sensual lust or that women should permit herself to be instruments of its satisfaction. She wrote that masturbation was dangerous. She stated, "In my personal experience as a trained nurse while attending persons afflicted with various and often revolting diseases, no matter what their ailments, I never found anyone so repulsive as the chronic masturbator. It would not be difficult to fill page upon page of heart-rending confessions made by young girls whose lives were blighted by this pernicious habit, always begun so innocently. She believed that women had the ability to control their sexual impulses and should utilize that control to avoid sex outside of relationships marked by confidence and respect. She believed that exercising such control would lead to the strongest and most sacred passion. She maintained links with affiliates of the British Society for the Study of Sex Psychology, which contained a number of high-profile gay men and sexual reformers as members, and gave a speech to the group on the issue of sexual continence. She later praised Ellis for clarifying the question of homosexuals, making the thing not exactly a perverted thing, but a thing that a person is born with different kind of eyes, different kinds of structures, and so forth. That he didn't make all homosexuals perverts, and I thought he helped clarify that to the medical profession, to the scientists, and the world, as perhaps one of the first ones to do that. Freedom of speech. She opposed censorship throughout her career. Grew up in a home where orator Robert Ingersoll is admired. She viewed birth control as a free speech issue rather than as a feminist issue. Yeah, man. So, you know, it is what it is. People have a role, and if ain't nobody hating, then you're doing something wrong. She was against Nazi eugenics program and donated to the American Council Against Nazi Propaganda. Whoa. I'm going to read this word for word. Sanger's eugenics, and we're going to wrap this up. This is a good way to wrap the episode. Sanger's eugenics policies included an exclusionary immigration policy, free access to birth control methods, and full family planning autonomy for the able-minded, as well as compulsory segregation or sterilization for the profoundly retarded, quote unquote. Sanger wrote, "We do not believe that the community could or should send to the lethal chamber the defective progeny resulting from irresponsible and unintelligent breeding." In The Pivot of Civilization, she criticized certain charity organizations for providing free obstetric and immediate post-birth care to indigent women without also providing information about birth control nor any assistance in raising or educating the children. By such charity, she wrote, I'm confused now. The poor woman is taught how to have her seventh child, when what she wants to know is how to avoid bringing into the world her eighth. Get poorer and poorer sometimes. And I understand, both sides to every argument. Most arguments, not all arguments. A lot of crazy arguments. And that brings us to the end, my friends, of another Friday podcast. And I gotta get ready to go to the iPod squad. So let me try to bust the flow like a motherfucking pro. About to chill with my bros. Smoke until we talk slow.